I don't know. I'm going to do this really quick. Okay, so absolutism in Austria and Prussia. So how did the rulers of Austria and Prussia transform their nations into powerful absolutist monarchies? Well, we haven't talked about them at all because they haven't really been relevant yet. You can just put that there. But here's the deal. Here, you can watch the lecture. This is what your homework is tonight. Okay, so overview of absolutism in Austria and Prussia. There's still serfdom, which means that peasants are basically enslaved. Okay, they have a strong nobility, which is not good for them, right? Which we learned from Western absolutism because we want to push that down. Large armies, increased taxation to feed those armies, and then suppressing representative institutions. So no constitutionalism is happening. So think about which of these is different from Western absolutism. Okay, I'm not sure what just happened. There we go. Okay. Yep, that's good. Yes, sir. Oops. Okay, so Austrians. Okay, so these are still the Habsburgs. The Habsburgs are going to be around for a while. So the Habsburgs, that's the same family as Charles V. So you know that the Holy Roman Empire is starting to kind of fall apart. So it focuses its power center in Austria, which is part of the Germanies, okay? I just kind of said that. So, they confiscated Protestant lands, gave them to Catholic nobility. You guys can see this. Basically, the Austrian Habsburgs worsened the conditions for serfed peasants and eliminated Protestantism in Austria, okay? So here is what the Holy Roman Empire has sort of been reduced to, okay? So here's the Habsburgs still in Spain, and all this stuff is all in, like, political disarray because of, you know, the Reformation. And so this yellow stuff here, this is all, like, Austria and Austrian territory here in Italy, okay? So we're going to fill this out in class too. Steps to the Habsburg absolutist rule here. Ferdinand II uses noble support to acquire absolute rule of Bohemia. Remember Bohemia? That's like modern day Czech Republic, where Jan Hus is from. They're the people who started the 30 Years' War. And then Ferdinand III, the next one, and here are his dates, centralized the government in Vienna, which is going to be kind of like the Paris of the Holy Roman Empire, and created a standing army to internally control. Because remember, he still has a really big, powerful nobility to contend with. Ferdinand III also recovered Hungary from the Ottoman Empire, okay, between these dates, so he's getting land away also from the Ottoman Empire. And then finally, Hungarian nobles resisted Habsburg rule, ultimately with an uprising, but agreed to be a part of the Habsburg Empire, okay, but nobles still got some of their power. It's going to get worse with the Hungarians. This is Schonbrunn Palace in Vienna, which is comparable to the Palace of Versailles in France. Okay, so like I said, Schonbrunn Palace is comparable to Versailles in Paris, okay? So it's like a big political center. What does this remind you of? Oh, it reminds me of, you know, Versailles. Okay, cool. So let's talk about Prussia. So wait, let me just summarize. So basically, Austria is what's left of the Holy Roman Empire after the religious wars during the Reformation. And it's important because Austria is going to be an increasingly dominant power in Europe. And it's similar to Western absolutism in the sense that you have strong centralized leaders with large militaries, but different in the sense that they increased serfdom. If you didn't read this in your notes, I'm just going to tell you right now, that the Austrians increased serfdom and nobles' control over the peasants in order to keep the nobles under control. So instead of controlling the nobles like they did in the West, like in France, through like spies and taxes and taking power away, the Austrians did it differently. They sort of just appeased them. So instead of like the carrot and the stick, they mostly just got the carrot. Okay, so let's see how they do things in Prussia compared to Austria. Prussia in the 17th century. The family that you want to think of with Prussia is the Hohenzollerns. That's a fun one to say, Hohenzollerns, Hohenzollerns. Okay, so Austria, you know, is the Habsburgs. The French, they're the Bourbons. The Spanish are still the Habsburgs. And in England was the Tudors, and then they'll be the Stuarts, but we'll talk about them on Monday. Okay, so here. Prussia, Hohenzollerns. More Fredericks. So we have Frederick William the Great Elector. He's called the Elector. You probably read about in your notes because there were different historical electors who would participate in electing a Holy Roman Empire. So now Prussia is still part of the kind of Germanies, and Prussia will later become modern-day Germany. So Frederick William was just somebody with a lot of power, okay, and here are his reign dates. He wanted to consolidate power and start his own, like kind of increase the power of Prussia, kind of separate from the Holy Roman Empire. So he had to deal with the Junkers, which were not the Junkers, the Junkers, who were the Prussian nobility, and they were huge power obstacles, just like they were everywhere else. So in 1660, he's like, look guys, I'll tell you what, why don't you just like let me tax you, and you can have total control of your serfs, like they did in Austria. So his son, Frederick I, and here are his dates, became, because of this, very financially independent. And so what did he do? He built this huge standing army, and he was titled king by the Habsburgs for helping the Holy Roman Empire during the War of Spanish Succession. So he got what he wanted all along, which was his own country. Yay! Okay, so here's Freddie saying, I got the Junkers to cooperate with me taxing them. I got mad cash, and the peasants suffered serfdom at the hands of power-hungry Junkers. Oh, sucks for them. And then Here's Frederick II. Oh yeah, Dad, I was so rich and I had such a big army and no local territories could oppose me. And then the Habsburgs made me king. Yay, hooray. Okay, so the consolidation of Prussian absolutism. Frederick William I, I'm telling you, these Fredericks are going to make us crazy, but Frederick William I, and here are his dates, was obsessed with military dominance. So he eliminated all representative government in Prussia. So it's like a total absolutism. Nobody's participating but him. There was universal male conscription that fed the army, which means the draft. Junkers were made commanders, but he's still controlling him that way, you know. And then Prussia could be best characterized by harsh peasant bondage and Junker tyranny. It was a highly militaristic society. So think about why he would make the Junkers the commanders. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to let you look at this kind of summary screen. Oops, sorry about that. Okay, so let's talk about Russia and the Ottoman Empire. Here's a bit of an overview. Russia was on the edge of the Asian and European society. Russia, like throughout this entire class, we're going to talk about how Russia has like a very conflicted identity. Like Europeans think they're backwards, that they're Asian, they're not even really European, and the Russians are really going to struggle to find their own place in European culture. The Ottoman Empire was more religiously tolerant than Europe, like by far more religiously tolerant than Europe. The Ottomans combined Byzantine traditions with those that were Persian and Arab, and the Ottoman Empire derived strength from its openness to new ideas and practices. So it's almost kind of like the opposite in many ways of kind of what was happening in Europe. So why haven't we talked about Russia yet? Russia until until the 1460s was completely dominated by the Mongol yoke. Yoke means an oppressive power. So Muscovy, which will become Moscow, eventually rose up to oppose them. Ivan the Great, Ivan the Third, same guy, established himself as an autocrat, a self-ruler, like I have the power to rule, so I'm just going to be the ruler, of the new Muscovite state. So just like the Junkers were the nobles in Persia, the boyars are the nobles in Russia, and they helped Muscovite princes consolidate power just like Prussia and Austria. He borrowed the tax and bureaucracy from Mongols, like he borrowed like their system of taxation and bureaucracy, and he made claims based on political and religious traditions of the Byzantine Empire. So he tried to establish Russia as like a Western key geographical feature, I guess, of the West by calling it the Third Rome, because after the Byzantine Empire collapsed, like they're sort of like picking up the torch of, you know, the Roman Empire. Here's a cool painting of Ivan the Great establishing power over the Mongol yoke. So, is Russia a Western nation? Whoops. So just because he used the nobility to consolidate power and borrowed Byzantine tradition, which, you know, they're basically Catholic. They call themselves Eastern Orthodox, but the traditions are very, very, very close. I think they use like a different calendar, and there might be like one more difference. I can't remember offhand what it is. The Eastern influence, though, is that they did borrow the bureaucracy from the Mongols, and they forced smaller principalities to pay the same tributes, just like the Mongol yoke did. So they had a similar taxation system. Here's a map that kind of shows us the growth. So here's Moscow in 1300, just this tiny, yeah, just like Moscow, right? And then when, all right, so it starts to expand, and finally Ivan III goes to town. Oops, sorry, he's all the way over here. And then he pushes himself further west, you can see. All right, here's another better map, I think. So this is like Muscovy, so like basically Russia, Lithuania. I don't even think, yeah, like, yeah, Prussia's like not even on the map yet. Like this would be Prussia over here. Here's Austria to kind of put things in perspective. You can see going back earlier how like Austria doubled in size by taking over Bohemia here and Hungary. So yeah, we're not talking about Austria, but I just wanted to point that out to you. Okay, so the Tsar. The Tsar is a Russian word for Caesar, so Tsar and his people. So Ivan III, he left a legacy of expansion, diplomatic marriage, and freedom from, obviously, the Mongols. Then Ivan the Terrible continued to expand territories pretty ruthlessly and continued to defeat the Mongols. And after the death of his wife, which he's accused of committing, wiped out many of the existing boyars and their families very violently. So, yeah, he just kind of killed a lot of people. So he used oppressive methods to continue serfdom. Urban workers pretty much were treated the same way. And so he really suppressed the rights of the middle class, which is the opposite of what they did in the West. But then comes Peter the Great. So here's kind of the road to Peter the Great throughout the Romanov dynasty. There were a lot of Cossacks, which were these armed peasants and peasant rebellions, which kind of united the nobles, which is not good if you're trying to have a strong autocratic absolutist rule. So I'll let you kind of read through this on your own. Basically, it all comes down to Michael Romanov. Okay, he extended serfdom, inspired rebellions, but he crushed them. He did expand Russia. He took the Ukraine from Poland, and this sort of paralleled the results of Western exploration, sort of setting the stage then for Peter the Great. And here are his dates. Peter the Great, notice his distinct lack of beard, and we'll talk about that in a minute, was obsessed with modernizing Russia, and he actually like redefined the entire Russian alphabet. So he copied French, because remember we talked about how French was like the predominant language of the time, and he used secret alliances to go to war with Sweden in order to gain territory. It was not the easiest win like he thought it would be, but eventually it ended up with a decisive victory over Sweden in the Battle of Poltava. Okay, so he acquired Latvia and Estonia, and this is one of the most important battles in Russian history. Yay, typo. Sorry, I suck. Okay, so how did he do this? He required all the nobles to serve in the military or civic administration for life. So that's how he gets control over the nobles. Yeah, you can have title. Yeah, you can have the prestige, but you have to serve the military or the government forever. He also required that they become educated, because he knew that modernization was going to come through education. He wanted an educated group of people. Peasants were conscripted in the army for life, but they were also able to attain upward mobility because they were able to so peasants were able to achieve upward mobility, because they were able to work their way up through the ranks of the military, which is what this is talking about here, okay? And other peasants were forced to work in factories and mines to fuel the army. So he was a very efficient, and he basically built the Russian Empire this way. So here's the expansion here. So this is why, I mean, he gained all of this. Wait, no, just kidding. All of this, including St. Petersburg, all right, as a result of this war. Now, what about all this? I mean, this is a huge chunk of land here. This is more important because it's further west, so it's making them more and more European, which was important to the Russian people. So besides just having geographic proximity to the West, he also wanted their culture to further kind of mimic the West. So he built St. Petersburg, which is like Versailles, which is like Schonbrunn, at the expense of the nobles' money and peasants' lives, pretty much in labor. He required nobles in the urban class to live in St. Petersburg, much like Louis XIV did with Versailles. He required that they shave their beards, like I said, distinct lack of beard. He literally would go up to people and cut their beards off. Freely, he was a go-getter. We'll just put it that way. He said just choose your own spouses. No more of this old school mixed matched marriage stuff. Added prestige to administrative offices to get people to actually want to serve. He was among the worst, worst received reforms of the nobility was unigeniture. So instead of splitting up the land amongst all their children, they could only leave land to one son because they didn't want the land to become divided. This was the worst for peasants because it increased serfdom and created a larger gap between the educated nobility and the poor. So let's quick review. Here's Ivan the Great. I freed Moscow from the Mongols and laid the military and diplomatic foundations for the rise of the Russian Empire. Huzzah! Okay, so then here's Ivan the Terrible. I suppressed the power of the boyars and allied with the Cossacks. I also expanded territory and subjugated the serfs. Not to mention, I'm a murdering fiend. Bwahahaha. And then here is Peter the Great, and he says, "Whew, what didn't I do? Man, I built a war machine at the expense of peasants and boyars. I built universities and factories, not to mention St. Petersburg, simplified the Russian alphabet, and I made the nobles shave." So, over here. Okay, sorry. So, similarities of Eastern European absolutism. I will give you this sheet. So, calm. It's going to be okay. But let's talk about it. Well, Austria, Prussia, and Russia all achieved obedience from their nobles, respectively named, by expanding serfdom and giving them land and titles. So, bribery, basically. A little bit of carrot, a little bit of stick, a lot of carrot usually. You guys know the metaphor, I hope. Okay, so in Austria, they centralized the government in Schonbrunn. In Prussia, they had a strong standing army with conscripted nobles. And in Russia, just like they did in Austria, he had the government centered in St. Petersburg. So then they have a strong standing army, expanded territory. I went the wrong way. Here's the growth of the Ottoman Empire. I should probably leave that up. So yeah, they accepted everybody. They had the millet system, which is where each nation collected taxes that was paid to the Sultan, but it was also self-government. It's an extremely modern form of government if you really think about it. And until Suleiman the Magnificent, which we'll talk about a little bit, sultans only procreated with concubines to avoid sharing power with wives, which is very clever. He broke the pattern and actually divided the power into bureaucracy, which serves him very well in the short term and does very badly for the Ottoman Empire in the long run. Then they had this like slave army of Janissary Corps, which is featured in several popular video games, and as it should be, because it's like really cool. It actually, people, even though it's a slave army, people are like, dude, I want to be a Janissary, and they had like extremely huge prestige and privilege throughout the Ottoman Empire. They were European mostly, because that's who slaves were in the Ottoman Empire. They became so prestigious, like I said, it became a volunteer army, and it was huge upward mobility for slaves, and it kicked butt out of the Europeans. And here is the Ottoman Empire at its height under Suleiman the Magnificent in 1580. Look at all the pretty yellow. There it is. So what were these distinctive features? To answer our question, well, it would have been nice if I didn't just close the PowerPoint on you. But let me see. This is a current slide. Boom. Well, in Russia, we have Mongol conquest that led to harsh rule by Tsarist autocracy. All segments of Russian society was into state service. Huge multi-ethnic empire, just like the Ottomans. And then they had a distinctive political and economic system, the Millet system, where all land theoretically belonged to the Sultan, but they still had self-rule of these various territories, because obviously it was huge. You just saw that map. And it was served by a slave corps of administrators and soldiers, and highly religiously tolerant. Have a fabulous, fabulous evening. Cheers.